Tensions are high in Honduras on the anniversary of the 2009 coup d'etat. We take a deeper look at the G20 summit being held in Japan. And the Iranian foreign minister says not enough progress has been made to save the nuclear deal. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Honduras is marking the 10th anniversary of the coup that ousted former President Manuel Zelaya, with protests against the current president Juan Orlando Hernandez. Thousands of Hondurans are using the occasion to pile pressure on Hernandez to resign. Demonstrations have been taking place for the past 2 months against government decrees to privatize education and healthcare. Our correspondent Gilda Silvestrucci is on the ground in the capital.
Tegucigalpa, like other cities across the country, remain militarized. As of yet, no reason has been given to why. However, the Liberty and Refoundation Party has been holding peaceful activities, including the installation of a floral display at the monument of the first Tuesday of Resistance in Murillo. Lamentably, the military and the military police prevented the party from realizing the activity. There has been full military deployment in the streets, in Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula, an attempt to intimidate people, including the press. Just moments ago, a member of the security forces was taking photos of journalists here, including our team here covering events. Tonight, the Liberty and Refoundation Party has scheduled a concert and a march into the center of the capital.
And Gilda Silvestrucci has been covering events in Honduras since the unrest began.
On the streets, violence and repression is the same as those days before the coup in 2009. Militarization and criminalization of the protesters hasn't stopped.
We've left behind blood and sweat on the road. We've lost our comrades, our brothers who have fought.
For us, it's a struggle. We have to follow through so we can be free from this dictatorship. And we are also fighting for our children, for our grandchildren.
Nearly 70% of Honduras' population lives in poverty. Over the past decade, current government authorities who were part of the coup have created this grim reality. The country has also seen a worsening of corruption.
10 years ago, our country began to rebuild a model of accumulation of wealth with new forms of entrepreneurship linked to organized crime, drug trafficking, and giving privileges to transnational companies in the country.
Privatizations and concessions of territory of mining and hydroelectric plants were carried out immediately after the 2009 coup.
It's been a process of depending neoliberalism, social contradictions for the past decade. We are in a highly sensitive moment for the country.
The change of government following the ousting of former President José Manuel Zelaya Rosales wasn't an answer to Honduras' problems. In fact, it was the beginning of a grave crisis.
First, we need to change this government. It's a failure. They've had 10 years and they're even worse. Second, we need to change the figures who dominate the society, beginning with the political class and their stance towards the United States.
Murders, criminalization, prosecution and exile, and military power consolidated to the political power. It all happened after the coup in 2009. Statistics from the human rights organizations reveal that more than 700 people were murdered during the coup. Their relatives are still seeking justice. Those responsible for the coup haven't faced trial, and the murders of hundreds of people remain unpunished.
It all remains the same, because the public ministry and the Supreme Court have kept hidden the reports. For example, for my daughter Izzy, obeyed even the ballistic report.
The public ministry has taken little action to bring the requirement of the cases to the prosecutors.
José Manuel Zelaya was accused of promoting a referendum to approve his re-election, but in fact, the current president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, was the one who violated the Constitution while being supported by powerful groups, the Supreme Court and the armed forces.
Moving on, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has pledged to continue the frozen dialogue with the opposition in Norway despite alleged assassination attempts against him.
Yo prefiero entonces callar.
I prefer to keep quiet because in these cases I want to advance the dialogue with the Norwegians, if it's going to continue, and we're going to advance with verifiable agreements for the sake of peace in Venezuela.
After an investigation lasting more than a year, the government of Venezuela says it has prevented another attempted coup. A number of civilians and former military officers have been arrested in connection with the plot.
Attacks on military bases like this one were part of the plan to carry out another coup in Venezuela. They also planned to steal weapons and to murder generals and government leaders. President Maduro confirmed the plot.
The complicity of Ivan Duque and the Colombian government is clear. They played an active part in this fascist attempt to kill me and mount terrorist attacks with bombs to kill social movement leaders in Venezuela. Where else could this murderous plan come from but from the Colombian oligarchy, from Ivan Duque and Álvaro Uribe, the killers of Colombia? And the world should know that from Colombia there is a conspiracy to subvert the peace and unity of Venezuela. We will not tolerate this.
The people from abroad in collaboration with the North Americans and the Israelis.
The authorities presented 56 hours of recordings as evidence.
Lo que no sabía Duque, lo que no sabía Piñera.
What Duque, Piñera, and Guaidó didn't know was that our intelligence services had been tracking all these operations for 14 months.
A todas estas operaciones.
Opposition figures are seen and heard preparing attacks, but they also seem to be divided.
They were going to free Raúl Baduel from his jail at Sebin, take him to the Carlota base, then take him to the public TV channel, and from there declare Raúl Baduel president of Venezuela, a second self-proclaimed president in less than 6 months. So I wonder, did they consult Guaidó, or was it to be a coup by Baduel against Guaidó and against President Maduro? That is how things stand in the ranks of Venezuela's far right.
Un golpe militar.
The former general Raúl Baduel is in prison for corruption. While the self-proclaimed leader Juan Guaidó dismissed the government's accusation linking him to this new coup attempt, political observers say Guaidó's reaction is an attempt to minimize the accusations of corruption against members of his inner circle for stealing humanitarian aid in Colombia. A case has been opened against 14 civilians and former military officers for their part in this latest attempt to take power by force. The Attorney General is accusing them of conspiracy and terrorism.
On Wednesday, several Caribbean countries joined a protest at the Organization of American States over the seating of a delegation claiming to represent Venezuela. Antigua and Barbuda's Foreign Affairs Minister told the Assembly's plenary session in Colombia that the OAS needs urgent reforms. He says, as it stands, a few powerful countries coerce 18 votes in a non-transparent way and then impose their will on all. The Foreign Ministry says the OAS is now being regarded as a punitive organization, not a healing one. It is becoming an organization that pours oil on troubled water. If this broken system and disregard for consensus building continues, if a crippled OAS limps along as a house divided against itself, it will collapse and something might emerge in its place.
Ambassador Rock.
Our correspondent Paola Fernandez has more from the OAS meeting in Colombia.
Here in Colombia, the OAS General Assembly is taking place where several countries expressed their rejection of the presence of a delegate of Venezuela's opposition leader, Juan Guaidó. For example, Uruguay left the opening event and other countries followed, like Bolivia, who said that Venezuela had already left the OAS and that's why it shouldn't be a central topic. They said that accepting a delegate could mean recognition by the OAS of Juan Guaidó as president. Also joining the call were Nicaragua, Mexico, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, Antigua and Barbuda, Suriname and Dominica. There have also been several protests to denounce the humanitarian crisis in Colombia, which hasn't been discussed at this meeting.
And coming up after the break, we take a look at the G20 summit taking place in Japan. Stay with us. At the G20 summit in Japan, Russian President Vladimir Putin has called on the Brics countries to boost international payments in national currencies and leave aside the US dollar. The president was addressing leaders from Brazil, India, China, and South Africa on the sidelines of the main G20 meeting in the city of Osaka. The 5 Brics nations represent 40% of the world's population and almost a quarter of the global GDP. Putin said they had a duty to seek a more stable international economy.
It is symptomatic that international trade is losing its role as the economic growth locomotive and bearing a heavy burden of protectionism, politically motivated restrictions and barriers. We see low business activity, world debt growth, high volatility on financial, currency and raw materials markets. Under these circumstances, BRICS states should take the initiative in the formation of a more just and stable model of global development, based on the principles of equality, respect to sovereignty, and consideration of all countries' interests.
And to gain greater insight into the events at the G20 summit, we are joined live from Argentina by Daphne Estoso. She is a specialist in China issues, bilateral relations, and political risk analysis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation and greetings from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Thank you. Daphne, what, if anything, do you expect to come out of this summit?
Well, to be honest, I don't expect too many different things than from the last G20 summit, which was held in Buenos Aires City in December. To me, G20, this time in Osaka, in Japan, is bringing together all the contradictions of a very interconnected but very highly fragmented world. As I think you were saying before, the most representative political group group countries at the world stage will return 10 in September this year, and this group of countries represent 80% of the world GDP. And it's a sign, which is very important, of a road toward the multipolar configuration of the world order, overcoming the anachronistic conception of the G7. But truly, the G20 works as a meeting point for leaders to have in a 2 days time or maybe 3 days time if they stay longer, bilateral meetings, if lucky, trilateral meetings like the one between Prime Minister Modi, which was recently re-elected, President Trump, and President from China, Xi Jinping.
Daphne, the U.S. President Donald Trump has already had a closed-door meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said, "We have lots to discuss." What do you think could be the main issue in their discussions?
This is important because this was the very first formal meeting in a year. We have to remember that last year here in Buenos Aires, Trump canceled the meeting with Putin after Russia detained 3 Ukrainian ships with dozens of sailors, saying the meeting that wouldn't occur until the situation was resolved. But today the situation isn't resolved, and still Trump scheduled the meeting. They have a very casual and almost funny thing between them, because one of the journalists say something funny there. But the thing is that I feel Mr. Trump is risking again being casual with Putin, is risking again the domestic political reaction, tolerating these sentences and things from Putin. But still, they're very friendly. It's a great honor to be with you, President Putin. We have a very, very great meetings, etc. But at the end, it's not only with Putin. The thing is that Trump is supporting a very unilateral perspective of the international relations, and most of the leaders are in an opposite point of view so far, I feel.
President Putin called on the Brics countries to restore stability in the world economy, and he suggested they move away from using the dollars in their transactions. Does the Brics group still have an important role to play?
Yes, of course. I really celebrate the meeting between Brics leaders, which includes, we have to say, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I feel like this group of country leaders and this meeting group was a little bit freezed, but I celebrate they are supporting the multipolarity. They're against and condemn the unilateralism. They oppose the protectionism, the unlawful sanctions, and we do have to mention that in that meeting, President Xi Jinping, he was very clear. He said the international situation is complicated, and we are in a very severe period. But he's calling to the world community to join, to strengthen solidarity and cooperation, and the Brics countries to strengthen their strategic partnership. So little by little, I feel I feel it's a very positive joint meeting.
Daphne, lastly, the meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping will be very closely watched because of the trade war. Will China use its close relation with North Korea as a bargaining chip with the U.S.? Daphne, can you hear me? I think we've lost her.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you listen to the last question I asked you?
Yes, you were talking.
Yes, I think we lost her, but we will be shortly back. But up next, has enough been done to stop the Iranian nuclear deal unraveling? Don't go away. The Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said not enough progress was made to save the Iranian nuclear deal at a meeting between diplomats in Austria. The remaining nuclear deal signatories, including a number of countries in the European Union, as well as China and Russia, met in Vienna. The United States unilaterally withdrew from the deal a year ago, reimposing aggressive sanctions on Iran. Araghchi said a final decision on uranium production would be taken in Tehran.
Today we had a lengthy Joint Commission meeting more than 3 hours. All in all, I believe that it was a positive and constructive meeting. I can say one step forward compared to the previous meetings we had, but it is still not enough, and it is still not meeting Iran's expectations. I would certainly report back to Tehran the developments took place in this meeting, the progresses we made in this meeting, and the final decision obviously would be by Tehran to take.
The Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister also addressed INSTEX, the instrument in support of trade exchanges created by France, Germany, and the United Kingdom to facilitate a non-dollar trade with Iran.
The European countries, the E3 actually explained in details about INSTEX and the progress that they have made in INSTEX. The INSTEX is now operationalized, and the first transactions are already processed, and more European countries have now joined as shareholders, and it is open to all European countries to do business with Iran. Europeans are working to open it to other countries. What we insist is that for INSTEX to be useful for Iran, Europeans need to buy oil from Iran or to consider credit lines for this mechanism. Otherwise, INSTEX is not as they and us expect.
We asked Telesur's political analyst Tariq Ali to explain the tensions between Iran and the United States.
The big demand of the Israelis has been to bomb the nuclear reactors like they did in Iraq some decades ago. The Israelis carried out those attacks, and the United States still recently has been resisting any unilateral Israeli action. And I think that is why the Trump government upped the pressure on Tehran, but they have a huge problem. There was people like John Bolton and other rogue state luminaries in the State Department, and not to mention Pompeo himself, are carrying out this campaign. It appears to be the case that the Pentagon is opposed to any foolish, irrational war in Iran for the time being. So they were thinking of a token bombing in response to Iran bringing down a U.S. drone in its territorial waters. They thought a short, sharp response would be necessary. They almost got it through the Pompeo-Bolton faction, and at the last minute, Trump pulled the plug and said, no, don't do it. Why did he do that? I think because there was opposition in the Pentagon. Otherwise, the whole thing had been agreed. And the pressure really comes from the Israelis, who do not want any sovereign state in the Middle East.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Daphne Estoso. Thank you for watching.